On today's Visual Studio Toolbox, James is going to show us how to write less boilerplate code in our MVVM apps. Hi, welcome to Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Robert Green, and on today's show, my good friend James Montemagno is joining us to talk about the .NET Community Toolkit. Hey, James.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
Good. Welcome onto the show. Welcome back to the show.
I know it's an honor and a privilege. It has been a long time since we've been together back in my Xamarin days when we kind of started that off.
Then you had your own show.
now I have another one. They keep giving them to me. So yeah, now I host on.net over on the .NET YouTube and on the docs page, of course, where we talk about all sorts of .NET stuff, which is really fun.
Yeah. So we were at a conference, the Dev Intersection Conference down in wonderful Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago. And you showed the demos that you're going to show today. And I was so blown away. I said, you got to come on Toolbox and show these. I know you did an on.NET episode on the Community Toolkit. We'll have links to that, but I really wanted to focus on the stuff in there that is just super cool for MVVM developers. And I was just blown away at how much code I now don't have to write thanks to this wonderful creation.
Yeah, so this is really fun because you actually attended my .NET MAUI workshop, which was really fun. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes. And through that, I talk about a lot of how to get up and running with any XAML-based application and an MVVM, model view view model. And we specifically do it in a .NET MAUI app. But what I was telling you was that, hey, the stuff that I'm teaching actually applies to any XAML-based MVVM application. And you're like, oh, really? Like, what about WPF and framework and core and this and that? Yeah. All of them, right? So I think in the world of MVVM, I'm a big MVVM person, a big XAML person. You know, I've done all the frameworks, all the UI stuff over the years. And I focus a lot on, you know, client development for iOS, Android, Mac, and Windows, cross-platform stuff with Xamarin and now .NET MAUI. Yep. And for me, there are amazing libraries and frameworks out there that introduce let's say like architecture best patterns, right? You have like Prism and things like this that are really lovely libraries, or MVVM Lite. And these are a little bit more opinionated. And I myself, I always wanted just little helper libraries that would not give me a full architecture pattern, let me decide, but give me the things that I don't want to write, like commands and different observable collection stuff. And I had a library, MVVM helpers, for a long time that did this. And then I stumbled upon the .NET Community Toolkit, which was an evolution of the Windows Community Toolkit, which came from the WPF Community Toolkit and all the things, right? And I had Sergio on, one of the maintainers of this. And there's actually a whole organization on GitHub called Community Toolkit. So github.com/communitytoolkit. And there's tons of them. There's one for Windows, one for .NET MAUI, and one specifically for .NET, which is just generic that you can use in any application that's .NET based and introduces all sorts of stuff. And this one specifically is the MVVM Community Toolkit, which is really cool. So I'm not even going to show any .NET MAUI code. I'm just going to show actually some WPF code. But I think what's really cool about this is it's all the things that I wanted, which was MVVM helpers that was really optimized code that didn't have any framework that I needed to like change fundamentals of my application.
Yeah. And I think, and we'll see this later on, but one of the cool things about using this toolkit, and we're going to see that it uses source generators to write a lot of the code for you. I mean, what I would wind up doing is I'd go look at one of your sample applications and I'd say, oh, his base view model. Yeah, I'm going to start using that. And then I'd use that forever. And I don't know if you invented new things in it or other people invented new things in it, but that then became my standard boilerplate code until the next time I saw you do a demo app and you changed it. So this way, you've got not just leveraging from one person, but you've got this community building this thing. And then every time you use it, you're going to get the up-to-date latest and greatest of whatever's in there. So not only do you not have to write code, but you're kind of ensured that the code that you're not writing is the latest and greatest. It's kind of cool.
Well, do you want to see it? Do you want to get into it?
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Let's go ahead and bring up my screen. Yeah, and this is the GitHub page. So it's actually part of the .NET Foundation, which is really cool. Lots of people working on it inside of Microsoft and outside of Microsoft too. And you can see here, there's all sorts of stuff. There's the .NET one, the Windows, the MAUI one, and a bunch of other libraries that are really great. So I'm going to start off here first with a WPF app. Look at this. This is my beautiful, look at it. It's beautiful. But check this out. It's all set up. So if I type in James, Montemagno, boom, it totally does stuff. And if I click it, the submit, it submits it to the back end and it clears it off, right? So this is standard MVVM. We got data binding here and we got an ICommand, right? Beautiful. So nothing special there. So let's look at the code here. So here it is inside of Visual Studio. I'm in 2022, but this is preview, but standard will work as well. And this is a WPF app. It is .NET 6. However, this does work with .NET Framework applications. If you're using .NET standard libraries to share your view models, works with WinUI, UWP, Xamarin.Forms, .NET MAUI, all the things that I'm going to show today. So this is very simple. And probably some people are like, don't do a data context there, but I'm doing it. So very simple, just standard data binding, right? We have a first name property, a last name property, a full name property, and a submit command.
Okay.
And I have a view model. This code will look very, very familiar to any MVVM developers, right? I have an INotifyProperyChanged. And if I scroll the bottom down here, I have a very simple implementation of it. Maybe not the best. And then I have my own ICommand implementation that is totally not good because I stole it off of Stack Overflow from 100 years ago. And it's just in here. And then we have things like this, which is a bunch of getters and setters. And here I have my first name. I raised my property changed. I also changed the full name property changed, last name. Here's my full name here that just concatenates those two together. And I have my beautiful ICommand that literally submits and clears out the first name, last name. So boom, MVVM.
Beautiful. It's like the classic definition of boilerplate code in there.
Now, many people will say like, oh, I have a base view model or I'm using other helper libraries. Sure. Totally understandable in general. And even when I do that, some of this code still ends up looking like this, where I have like set property and it's still multiple lines of code inside of here. So what we want to do is get rid of all of this code and really get like really optimized, really tight code. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in this library. I've already added it here. It's the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm.
Okay. And so you just got it off of NuGet, right?
Just off of NuGet. So I just went into NuGet, boom, right here, boom, that's it.
Okay.
Now, right now, as of this recording, this is version 8.0. It's in preview 3 today. So you'll definitely want to grab whatever the preview is. So make sure you check that checkbox. This source code will be available so you can grab it, run it locally on your machine. And the team is still updating documentation. So the best way to do it is go to the GitHub page and browse through samples for all the stuff. But they're also putting out blogs as well. And I'll give you all those too. So here's what we do is we add that one single NuGet, nothing special. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just delete a bunch of code, Robert. Okay. I'm just going to delete all this code. I'm going to delete all of it. So deleting all the code, so much code. Look at all the code, just deleting all of it. Right now it's all mad. It's like super mad. There used to be 100 lines of code. Now there's like 30. I'm going to get rid of all these names. I'm Robert. I don't want any of it.
Right. Yeah.
Done. I don't want any of it. I don't want done. In fact, let's get rid of this thing. I fit it all on one page, Robert. Nice. That's what I want. So now nothing works. So nothing works yet. So let's do this. Let's use using CommunityToolkit.Mvvm. Okay. And I'm also going to do using CommunityToolkit.Mvvm. There's input. Oh, and I also want to do that component model. Okay. So those are the two namespaces. And there's a bunch in here that we're not getting into. There's like validation. There's all this other stuff. Sergio and I went through that, so definitely check that out. So here's the first thing that I can do is I can come in and I'm going to add an attribute. Instead of inheriting from INotifyProperyChanged, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add this attribute, which, yeah, this comes from the CommunityToolkit.Mvvm component model, So when I do that, a few things are going to happen. First, it's going to tell me, this is really cool. It says, hey, you're missing a partial modifier. And you're like, oh, that's okay. Okay, let's do that. So we're going to say partial. Okay. Now, if I actually came in and I said public main view model, we would notice that all of a sudden, there's new things in this, like on property or set property. Where did those come from, Robert? They're not in my source code, but where did they come from?
They're probably in the partial class, but you haven't written that partial class, have you?
I have not. In fact, as you mentioned earlier, these are source generators that is using this. So where do we find that? I'm glad that you asked, Robert, because they're hidden over here under analyzers. Here's the Community Toolkit source generators. And specifically, here's all of them that are in there. So there's one for ICommand, Messenger, Nullability, Observable Object, Observable Property, bunch of stuff. And if I go ahead and expand this, here's the partial class. Now, this is code.
So that code's already been written.
It's all been written. It just was generated. It was generated.
It was generated. And it doesn't generate at build. It generates real time.
Real time. I didn't do anything at all. Yep. It's all right here. So this is cool. This gives you every single thing that you need in here. Now, you would never touch this code ever, like, because this is generated. It tells you don't do it, don't change it. But this is giving me things.
You can look at it to understand what's going on and confirm that it's doing what you want it to do.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And the things that are in here, these are just nice helpers, right? So here we can tell that it's using equality comparers. It's actually like setting property changes. It's doing all the nice stuff that we want it to do. So it's figuring out all that hardness for us automatically, which is beautiful. Now, that's nice if you are using it where you can't like inherit from another class. So maybe you had a base view model and you couldn't inherit from something else. Now, built into this is also something called an observable object. And an observable object actually has the base class of all that stuff that you would need all ahead of time. So you can add that attribute, or you can do observable object, which implements INotifyProperyChanged and INotifyProperyChanging. So this is actually like really, really nice. So now we're not using source generators, but this gives you flexibility, right? You can inherit from the class, or you can go ahead and add the attribute, which will source generate.
Okay.
So now you can tell things are upset, right? Things are mad. First name doesn't exist. Last name doesn't exist, anything like that. So we want to light that puppy up. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another attribute, which is observable property onto this. Now notice first name, it exists somewhere, Robert.
Ooh, yeah.
It is. Now that one, it's very happy. So that is there. And that is because now, if we come over here, what we should see ideally is, boom, our source generator of observable property is lit up. And we're going to see that automatically. Look at this. This has been generated for us automatically. 100%.
So you created a string in lowercase and it created a property in uppercase. Camel case, literally.
That is correct. Yeah. Now this is very, very smart. It has some things. So if you did underscore, for example, it would generate the same code over here. See, look at right there.
Yeah.
Smart.
Interesting.
So the team has went through and they said, what are common naming conventions that developers are using, like M __, this and that. And they figure that all out for you automatically.
Nice.
Now, some other cool things in here is that this looks really long, this on property changing, on change, blah, 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 blah. And that is because the team actually optimized this by caching the property changed event. So they actually have really optimized code normally you would create a new property changed event over and over and over again. They've optimized. And that's why I like this. Like someone really smart figured out all the stuff. And I just add one line of code, Robert. That's all I got to do. So that's super cool. So now we got first name, last name inside of here. Now that's pretty rad. But if we run this, this is never going to update because we're never telling the full name to change. Remember, we used to have to call that manually.
Yep.
So inside of here, there's other things that we can add. Let me zoom in. If I do also, we can do also broadcast change, notify can execute for. So if we're having I commands, you can also do that. And I love that they give you this huge sample that you can just see here. But there's also notify change for. So that one, we can say, hey, also do name of full name. So whenever we change this, also call on property change for this. Now, and of course, you can line those up however you want. If you want one line, you want multiple line, depends what you want. So now, if we go back in that source generated code, notice, like this file's open, it just updates. Notice here that it's going to not only call changing for first name, but also full name too.
Very cool. Very cool.
Now you're probably saying, well, cool, we got that working. What about ICommands?
What about ICommands?
What if I just did ICommand? And now we're done.
No way.
Yeah, that's totally true. So
this is just about the coolest thing I've seen all year.
So now I can open up the source generator for this.
Possibly all of last year too.
Yeah. So lo and behold, what we'll see is that they've generated tons of optimized code. They have their own relay command, and this will automatically on demand create the relay command for me, call the submit, all that stuff. We're good to go. Now, what you're probably saying, Robert, is, well, what if I have an asynchronous task, an async command? Well, just do async task, hit save on there. Let's go back over here and let's see what our code looks like over here. Let's have it regenerate for us here. Oh, async task. So we got to bring in the namespace. That'll work. I'm going to go and open up that submit again. And now check this out. Async relay command. Done.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Now, Robert, you're probably saying, James, what if you have parameters? Sure. Let's do a string of name. Let's go in the generated code. Oh, look at that.
Unbelievable.
Now you're saying, okay, it's generated submit command. So it appends commands on the end. What if you did like submit async? What if you changed your name here, right? So what if this was async, for example?
Yeah.
Well, it's smart enough to, it's generated a new file. So let's go over here. It's generated submit async for us.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It is calling submit async, but they still called it submit command. Because you don't want it to be submit async command. That doesn't make any sense. So they chop off the async, but they're smart enough to know to call that for you automatically, which is really cool. Right. And that's all you need to do, which is really, really neat. So like now, if we just like, let's move this back to the void. Let's name it here. We're going to get rid of our stuff, right? Now we're back to our old stuff over here. I'm just going to hit run.
That generated async file go away?
Yeah. So that one, now the submit async went away. Now it's just submit and it's generated new code for us. So now we're going to go ahead and we have our app running over here. Let me zoom in. There we go. And sure enough, if I do James Montemagno, hit submit, boom.
That is so amazingly cool.
Yeah. And now, like I said, this code that I have here is really going to fit just about on, one line of code. We went from almost 100 lines of code, our own implementation, down to, honestly, this right here is just, 16, 17 lines of code.
Well, you don't have to write this plumbing code anymore, right? You obviously want INotifyProperyChanged. You obviously want commands. Why can't you just like attribute, just hook it up, right? Why do you have to go and learn that code in the first place and then use some implementation that you may have found to basically do plumbing code? We're supposed to be focusing on the UI and the business logic and the whole purpose of the app.
Yep. I agree 100%. So in the workshop, so I actually have the workshop. Let me pull it up here. Inside the .NET MAUI workshop, inside of this MVVM, it's really quite fun because I have you write all of the plumbing code,
right,
and then delete all of the plumbing code,
which is actually good because it's good to learn what's happening.
Exactly.
And then it's good to not have to write it ever again.
But to me, this is beautiful. Right? This is all I ever want to do. So to me, this is the way of creating this. Now, that being said, the only thing with this generated code is I think it does use C#8 features. So I do get this question a lot, which is I'm inside of a .NET framework app, and it actually gives an error. It says you need to update that. Now, I'm here inside of a .NET 6 app, so this is going to be using C#10. But you can always come in and say lang version, okay? And you can say 10.0 or you can say latest. And remember that these features of C#, most of them are compiler features. So the team that does the .NET Community Toolkit, they said, what's the maximum way of making sure that the code that they're generating is new and modern, but offers the best backwards compatibility? So you, in a .NET framework app, you can use C#10. There's nothing stopping you from using it. Of course, there are going to be, runtime features you can't use. But as far as the code, for example, this little question mark equals over here, this is a C#7 or 8 feature. You can just flip that on. You'll be good to go. It's going to cause no errors at all because it's a compiler thing. If it compiles, it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as you're targeting the right framework, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're in a .NET framework, inside this repo, let me open this up. For example, I have another .NET WPF app. This is a framework app. Okay. It's the same application inside of here. The other one's a little bit prettier, but if I actually go in and I say unload this thing, look at this 472. There's a big one in here, blah, 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 right?
Okay.
Now, in this instance, I'm using the old style SDK, old style stuff. So what I did is I put this code into .NET standard library, or you could put it into like a just standard class library there. So this will totally work. You can see the same exact code, totally good to go. And yeah, that'll work. And I just flip on the language version and you're off to the races.
And then your generated code is in that shared library.
Exactly. Yep. And that means it's going to be nice and testable in general. Yeah. That's it.
That is so fantastic.
It truly is.
All right.
That's all I got. That's all I got, Robert.
That is just so cool. So we will include links to where people can go get this and learn about it. Also put up a link to the longer on .NET episode where you talk about additional things. But, if you're doing MVVM, you should just start using this immediately.
Pretty much, yeah. And huge shout out to Sergio and the team.
Yep.
They use this like in production, like in the Microsoft Windows Store itself is in there. So it's like being used in production. It's cool. Sergio talks all about that and all the other features too. So definitely check out everything. So all I did was use it and talk about it. I had nothing to do with their creation. So shout out to the team that actually builds the stuff.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. This was awesome. And I hope you guys enjoyed that. We will see you next time on Visual Studio Toolbox.